the witch. Dring! That bell is a signal for me, not you, said Miss Spite sharply. Teachers love saying that. It's one of their catchphrases. As I'm sure you know, that all-time top 10 of teachers' catchphrases go like this. At 10, walk, don't run. A non-mover at 9. Are you chewing? Up to 3 places at 8. I can still hear talking. A former number 1 at 7. It doesn't need a discussion. A new entry at 6. How many times do you need to be told? Down 1 place at 5. Spelling! Another non-mover at 4. I will not tolerate litter. New at 3. Do you want to pass your GCSEs? Just missing the top spot at 2. Would you do that at home? And still at number 1. It's not just yourself you've let down, but the whole school. Taking the history lesson with Miss Spite. Miss Spite smelt a lot of rotten cabbages. That was the nicest thing about her. She was one of the school's most feared teachers. When she smiled, she looked like a crocodile that was about to eat you. Miss Spite loved nothing more than giving out punishments, once suspending a girl for dropping a pea on the floor of the school canteen. That pea could have someone's eyes out, yelled Miss Spite. Kids at the school had fun thinking up nicknames for their teachers. Some were fond, others were cruel. Mr. Paxton, the French teacher, was Tomato, as he had a big round red face, like a tomato. Their headmaster, Mr. Dust, was called the Tortoise, as he looked like one. He was very old, extremely wrinkly, and walked impossibly slow. The deputy head, Mr. Underhill, was Mr. Underarms, as he pondered it, especially in the summer. And Mrs. MacDonald, the biology teacher, was either the bearded lady or even Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy, as she, well, I can imagine you can guess why. But the other kids just called Miss Spite the Witch. It was the only name that really had ever fitted and was passed down through generations of pupils at the school. All the kids she taught passed their exams too. They were scared not to, though. We still have the small matter of last night's homework, Miss Spite announced with an evil relish that suggested she was desperate for someone to have failed to do it. Joe reached his hand into his bag. Disaster. His exercise book wasn't there. He'd spent all night writing this intensely boring 500-word essay about some old dead queen, but in the rush to get to school on time, he must have left it on his bed. Oh no, he thought. Oh, no. Joe looked over at Bob, but all his friend could do was grimace sympathetically. Miss Spite stalked the classroom like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, deciding which little creature it was going to eat first. To her evident disappointment, a field of grubby little hands held aloft essay after essay. She gathered them up before stopping at Spud. Miss, he stammered. Yes, Spud, said Miss Spite, drawing out her words as long as possible so she could relish the delicious moment. I did do it, but... Oh, yes, of course you did it, the witch cackled. All the other pupils except Bob sniggered too. There was nothing more pleasurable than seeing someone else get in trouble. I left it at home. Litter duty, the teacher snapped. I'm not lying, miss, and my dad will be at home today. I should have known. Your father is clearly penniless and on the dole, sitting at home watching daytime TV, much as you will be no doubt doing in 10 years' time. Yes? Joe and Bob couldn't help but share a smirk at this. Said Joe. If I called him and asked him to run the essay over here, would you believe me? Miss Spite smiled broadly. She was going to enjoy this. Spud, I will give you 15 minutes exactly to place said essay in my hand. I hope your father's quick. But, said Joe. No buts, boy. 15 minutes. Well, thank you, miss, said Joe sarcastically. You're quite welcome, said the witch. I like to think that everyone gets a fair chance to rectify their errors in my class. She turned to the rest of the class. The rest of you are dismissed, she said. The kids started to spill out in the corner. Miss Spite leaned after them and screamed, Walk! Don't run! Miss Spite couldn't help resist another catchphrase. She was the queen of the catchphrase, and now she couldn't stop. It doesn't need a discussion, she called after her pupils randomly. Miss Spite was on a roll now. Are you chewing? She howled down to the corridor to a passing school inspector. 15 minutes, miss, said Joe. Miss Spite studied her little antique watch. 14 minutes, 51 seconds, in point of fact. Joe gulped. Was Dad going to be able to get there that fast? Chapter 9. Finger. Finger? Asked Bob as he offered half his Twix to his friend. Oh, thank you, mate, said Joe. They stood in the quiet corner of the playground and contemplated Joe's bleak fate. What are you going to do? I don't know. I texted my dad, but there's no way he can get there in 15 minutes. What can I do? A few ideas raced through Joe's mind. He can invent a time machine and travel back in time and remember not to forget his homework. Might be a little hard to do, though, as if time machines had ever been invented then. Maybe someone would have come back from the future and prevented Piers Morgan's birth. Joe could go back to the classroom and tell Miss Spite that the tiger had eaten it. This would only be half a lie, as they did have a private zoo and a tiger, Jeff, and an alligator called Jenny. Become a nun. He would have to live in a nunnery and spend his days saying prayers and singing hymns and doing general religious stuff. On the one hand, the nunnery would give him sanctuary from Mrs. Spite, and he did look good in black, but on the other hand, it might get a bit boring. Go and live on another planet. Venus is nearest, but it would be safer to go to Neptune. Live the rest of his life underground? Perhaps even start a tribe below the surface of the earth dwellers and create a whole secret society of people who all own Miss Spite some homework. Have plastic surgery and change his identity. Then live the rest of his life as an old lady called Winnie. Become invisible. Joe wasn't sure how to do this, but it might be achieved. Run to the local bookshop and buy a copy of How to Learn Mind Control in 10 Minutes by Professor Stephen Haste, and very quickly hypnotize Miss Spite into thinking he had already given her his homework. Disguise herself as a plate of spaghetti bolognese. Bribe the school nurse into telling Miss Spite he had died. Hide in a bush for the rest of his life. He could survive on a diet of worms and grubs. Paint himself blue and claim to be a Smurf? Joe had barely had time to consider these options when two familiar shadows loomed behind them. Bob, said one of them, in a voice neither high nor low enough to determine its gender. The boys turned round. Bob tried fighting, simply handed them his slightly nibbled finger of Twix. Don't worry, he whispered to Joe. I've concealed a large number of Smarties down my socks. We don't want your Twix, said Grub number 1. No, said Bob. His mind started racing. Did the Grubs possibly know about the Smarties? No. We wanted to say we're very sorry for bullying you, said Grub number 2. And as a peace gesture, we would like to invite you round for tea, prompted Grub number 1. Tea? Asked Bob, incredulous. Yeah, and maybe you can all play Hungry Hippos together, continued Grub number 2. Bob looked at his friend, but Joe just shrugged. Thank you, guys. I mean, obviously. Obviously, said the unidentified Grub. But I am a bit busy tonight, continued Bob. Maybe another time, said a Grub, as the twins lolloped off. That was weird, said Bob, retrieving some Smarties that had now had a faint taste of sop. Couldn't imagine a night where I would want to go and play Hungry Hippos with those two. even if I lived until I was 100. Yeah, how strange, said Joe. He glanced away quickly. At that moment, a deafening roar silenced the playground. Joe looked up. A helicopter was hovering overhead. Very quickly, all the football games broke up, and the kids raced out of the way, descending an aircraft. Items from hundreds of packed lunches were whisked up into the air by a force of the blades. Packets of Quavers, a mint chocolate or Aero, even a Muller fruit corner danced around in the whirling air, before smashing to the ground as the engine shut down and the blade slowed to the stop. Mr. Spud leaped out of the passenger seat and raced across the playground holding the essay. Oh no, thought Joe. Mr. Spud was wearing a brown toupee that he held onto his head with both hands, and in one gold jumpsuit with bum air emblazoned on the back of his sparkly letters. Joe felt like he was going to die of embarrassment. He tried to hide himself behind one of the older kids. However, he was too fat and his dad spotted him. Joe! Oh, Joe, there you are! Shouted Mr. Spud. All of the other kids stared at Joe Spud. They hadn't paid much attention to the short new fat boy before. Now it turned out his dad had a helicopter. A real-life helicopter? Wow! Here's your essay, son. I hope that's okay. And I realised I forgot to give you your dinner money. Here's £500. Mr. Spud pulled out a wad of crisp new £50 notes from his zebra skin wallet. Joe pushed the money away, as all the other kids looked on in envy. Shall I pick you up at 4 p.m., son? Asked Mr. Spud. It's okay, thanks, Dad. I'll just get the bus, muttered Joe, looking down at the ground. You can pick me up in your helicopter, mate, said one of the older boys. And me! And me! Me! Pick me! Soon, all of the kids in the playground were shouting and waving to the short, fat, gold jumpsuited man's attention. Mr. Spud laughed. Maybe you can invite some of your friends over at the weekend so they can all have a helicopter ride, he pronounced with a smile. A huge cheer echoed around the playground. But, Dad, that was the last thing Joe wanted. For everyone to see how monstrously expensive their house was and how much crazy stuff they owned. He checked his plastic digital watch. He had less than 30 seconds to go. Dad, I gotta run, blurted out Joe. He snatched the essay out of his father's hands and raced into the main school buildings as fast as his short, fat legs would take him. Running up the staircase, he raced past the unfeasibly old headmaster, who was making his way down the Stanhope stairlift. Mr. Dust looked at least 100 years old, but was probably older. He was more suited to being an exhibit in a natural history museum than administrating a school, but he was harmless enough. Walk, don't run, he mumbled. Even very old teachers are fond of catchphrases. Hurling himself along the corridor to the classroom where Miss Spite was waiting, Joe realised that half the school was following him. He even heard someone shout, Hey, bum fresh boy! Unnerved, he pushed on. Bursting into the classroom, the witch was holding her watch in her hand. I've got it, Miss Spite, proclaimed Joe. You are 5 seconds late, she proclaimed. You've got to be kidding, miss. Joe couldn't believe anyone could be so mean. He glanced back behind him and saw hundreds of pupils staring at him through the glass. Such was the eagerness to catch a glimpse of the richest boy in the school, or perhaps even the world's. Noses were pushed up against the glass so they looked like a tribe of pig children. Litter duty, said Miss Spite. But, miss, a week's litter duty. Miss, 1 month's litter duty. Joe decided to say nothing this time, and he sloped across the classroom. He closed the door behind him. In the corridor, hundreds of little pairs of eyes were still staring at him. Oi, Billionaire Boy, came a deep voice from the back. It was one of the older boys, but Joe couldn't tell which one. In the sixth form, all the boys had moustaches and Ford Fiestas. All the little maths laughed. Lend us £1,000,000, someone shouted. The laughter was now deafening. The noise clouded the air. My life is officially over, thought Joe.
That's the end of these chapters, folks. If you enjoyed, please do not forget to like and subscribe. And comment down below which book I should read after this one. See you guys in the next chapters. Like and subscribe. And comment down below which book I should